Das Thakur ki jai. Prem Sagaho, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Swasti Gaur, Bhaktivedanta ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Govida Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Gidi Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadvip Dham ki jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulasi, Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samaveta Bhakti ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Banaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutade Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21, verse 36. Aho mamami vitaranchanugraham Harim Gurum Yagya Bhujam Adishwaram Swadharma Yogena Yajanti Mamaka Nirantaram Kshoni Tale Dhrdavrata Aho Mamami Vitaranchanugraham Harim Gurum Yagya Bhujam Adishwaram Swadharma Yogena Yajanti Mamaka. distributing anugraham, mercy, Harim, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Gurum, Supreme Spiritual Master, Yagya Bujam, all the demigods eligible to accept yagya offerings, Adishwaram, the Supreme Master, Swadharma, occupational duties, Yogena, by dint of, Yajanti, worship, Mamaka, having a relationship with me, Nirantaram, incessantly, Kshoni Tale, on the surface of the globe, Drda Vrata, with firm determination. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master and enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. He is the Supreme Spiritual Master as well. All of you citizens on the surface of the globe who have a relationship with me and are worshiping him by dint of your occupational duties are bestowing your mercy upon me. Therefore, O my citizens, I thank you. Purport. Maharaj Prithu's advice to his citizens to take to devotional service is now concluded in two ways. He has repeatedly advised persons who are neophytes to engage themselves in devotional service according to the capacities of the different orders of social and spiritual life. But here he specifically thanks those already engaged in such devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is actually the enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies and who is also the supreme teacher as Antaryami or Paramatma. There is a specific mention of the word Gurum, which indicates the Supreme Personality as Chaitya Guru. The Supreme Godhead in his Paramatma feature is present in everyone's heart, and he is always trying to induce the individual soul to surrender unto him and to engage in devotional service. Therefore, he is the original spiritual master. He manifests himself as spiritual master both internally and externally to help the conditioned soul both ways. Therefore, he has been mentioned herein as Gurum. It appears, however, that in the time of Maharaj Prithu, all the people on the surface of the globe were his subjects. Most of them, in fact, almost all of them, were engaged in devotional service. Therefore, he thanked them in a humble way for engaging in devotional service and thus bestowing their mercy upon him. In other words, in a state where the citizens and the head of state are engaged in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they help one another and are mutually benefited. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master and enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, and he is the Supreme Spiritual Master as well. All of you citizens on the surface of the globe who have a relationship with me and are worshiping him by dint of your occupational duties are bestowing your mercy upon me. Therefore, O my citizens, I thank you. So, Maharaj Prithu was king of the whole world. He was also a descendant from Manu. And it is mentioned in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam that the Manus and their descendants are called Vibhuti. They be given special powers by the Supreme Lord to carry out their functions. Similarly, great sages and devotees are called Vibhutis of the Lord, so they got some special power. Of course, these powers are temporary. When we have jivas with permanent power, then we call them Shaktivesh avatars, like Narada Muni. And Prithu himself, besides being a Vibhuti of the Lord by being a descendant of Manu, is also a Shaktivesh avatar. So he's in a very special position. He's also a form of the Supreme Lord in one sense, because he has special powers. In any case, because Prithu Maharaj comes in this line of kings, one of his functions is to restore and preserve dharma by maintaining the varnashram system, and to promote bhakti. So he has two functions. Throughout the day of Brahma, the Lord makes this arrangement for the upliftment of the human beings, and of course all jivas, in one sense, because if we have a good king, he benefits everyone, including animals and plants. So the Lord makes an arrangement for upliftment of the jivas in this material world. The Lord is not indifferent to the jivas. So he gives them good guidance in the form of a social system, varnashram, a leader, the king, with his ministers, etc. Plus, the king sets a good example by forming bhakti. So the king has two functions. One is this institution of dharma. And we see previously Prithu Maharaj was speaking a lot about dharma and rituals and sacrifices and things like that, which are parts of karma yoga. At the same time, which are, we say, the occupational duties. So everyone needs sustenance for the body. Even a yogi has to eat or breathe or do something, so we all need sustenance. So the varnashram system supplies that sustenance. You have a varna, and according to the varna, you have a job, a work. And according to the work, you get some sustenance. You get some food out of that job. So this is what the system does. But it is according, you get your results of support for your body according to rules. You have to follow rules. So this is what we call dharma. And the king is the person who institutes the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, then you get punished. So we have a whole set of rules that you have to follow to get your sustenance. Now this is somewhat similar to any political system we have in the world. We have a government and they have rules. You follow the rules, you don't get punished. You break the rules, then you get some punishment or whatever. So in that sense, quite similar. But at the same time, generally the governments don't prescribe which job you have, et cetera, like that. But in this system, your job and how you support yourself as a farmer or as a merchant or as a kshatriya or whatever, that's all enforced by the government. There's no free will there. And then you have restriction. You can't do sinful activity. And of course, in modern governments also they have, you can't steal, lie, cheat, murder, etc. Those are sinful activities. But there's borderline activities they don't consider sin, but in this system it's sin. So we have more complicated rules to follow in terms of, avoiding sin and doing punyas, etc. So all of this is enforced by the king. In this way, there's restriction on your sense enjoyment to some degree. At the same time, because people simply want to live and eat and do whatever they live their life, they are encouraged to get their material needs satisfied and their enjoyment satisfied by following rules. So this does not directly lead to liberation from the material world or bhakti. For that reason, this system is put on a lower level. It's the first step for everybody. So it's a system to gradually purify everyone, help them restrict their senses, so that eventually they will come to sattva guna, and then they will realize, oh, I'm not in the material body at all, so why am I engaged in all these material activities? So it's a first step. But it's also a necessary step because most of the people are on that level. They're coming up from the lower gunas. So in any society, probably 80% of the people are Sudra mentality, which means ignorance.
So therefore, they don't care much about being spiritual and all that. They just want to take care of their body, more or less survive in this material world, take care of the body, get a little enjoyment. So that's the Sudra. So what to do with such people? So gradual upliftment. Nevertheless, there's some upliftment, but it's a gradual process. So that is why there's an emphasis on Dharma in the scriptures. When it goes a little bit extreme, then we start criticizing it as being karmakanda and just interested in material enjoyment. But there is some benefit there because it restricts. If you want to get Svargaloka or whatever, you have to restrict your senses. You have to do vows and whatever. You can't just go out and try to enjoy. You have to follow some rules, do some vrata, some austerities. So in that sense, because there's restriction and it's carefully guided for upliftment in the gunas, it is beneficial for everyone. So that system is implemented by the king. And throughout the day of Brahma, there's an arrangement that a Manu appears and his descendants are there to enforce this system. So in this way, there's gradual purification of the human population. For those who have reached a higher stage, then we have other processes. We have Jnana Yoga, Astanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So these are the processes for people who have already been purified to some extent. So the king also, as we see here, Prithu Maharaj is also encouraging bhakti, and here in this verse he's talking about you should worship the Supreme Lord. But then he also says, according to your dharma, within your occupational duties you worship the Lord. So on a lower level, that is what they do. They're not much concerned about spiritual life and worship, but they have to do a little something, and they follow the rules set out by the king, and which are ultimately prescribed by the Supreme Lord. So they're following the rules of the Lord, and they progress by that. On a higher level, then they understand that their goal is not simply to live and maintain their body, but to do other things. So they dedicate more time to worship of the Supreme Lord. So that's a little bit higher conception within this Varnashram Dharma, where we understand that we do have a relationship with the Lord. And when people become a little disinterested in the material world, then they follow Nishkama Karma Yoga. They do all these duties, they support their body, but they're not much interested in material results. So they follow the system for purification only, not for getting enjoyment. So they don't aspire to go to Svargaloka or enjoy now. They do all these activities in order to purify themselves. And this prepares them for spiritual life, jnana or bhakti. And furthermore, they can do something else to make the whole system a little more spiritual. And that is, they offer the results of that system to Supreme Lord. This is what we call karma arpana. So they're doing all their duties in the Varnashram system, and they say, okay, well, dedicate everything to the Supreme Lord. And do that. So more connection with the Supreme Lord. So in this way, it becomes, let's say, spiritualized. This whole svadharma, doing your duties and supporting yourself, becomes spiritualized. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur often speaks of Daiva Varnashram and Asura Varnashram, Asuric Varnashram. So Asuric Varnashram is a system of social classes and jobs with no connection to the Supreme Lord at all. It's just a system. So that's what most political systems are in the world of the present, social systems. Okay, but we have a system here, and you follow the system, and you get your needs satisfied. They don't talk about God or anything. So the Daiva Varnashram, there is this link to the Supreme Lord. So it's automatically there in the system established by Shastras, where we have different varnas with different gunas and rules and regulations to gradually raise them up. So that system is made by the Supreme Lord. In Asuric Varnashram, there's no concept of raising people from Tamagun to Sattvagun and getting them out of the material world at all. Here, the whole goal is to raise a person to Sattvagun so that they can get liberated from the material world and give it up. So the goal is quite different. And therefore, all the rules and regulations are guided in that direction, though they also provide for your material needs as well. So in that Daiva Varnashram system, It is daiva or spiritual because, of course, the Lord is the one who produces this system. And if we follow that system, then that in that self is we're following the orders of the Lord. Secondly, the Lord has this whole goal in mind to spiritualize everybody. And it involves sense control. And there is also an element of worship of the Lord. So even if one is not quite interested in spiritual life, it's your duty to also worship the Lord. You can worship the devatas, but you also have to worship the Lord. So that's inherent in that system. Then, as well as that, we have the understanding that the goal is to reach a higher level. So those on a higher level in the Varnashram system, they realize this, that the whole goal is to ultimately get out of the material world, etc. So the Daiva Varnashram system is an assistance for people in general. We also have the process of bhakti, which sometimes we can equate with the Varnashram system as here Prithu does to some extent, because you worship me by following your swadharma, your occupational duties. So that's the type of bhakti in one sense, because we're relating everything to the Lord. However, we have another type of bhakti. It's got nothing to do with supporting your body, getting your material needs satisfied, etc. So that's what we normally mean when we talk of bhakti. That is chanting the Lord's name, saying Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's got nothing to do with your supporting your material body. We're not indicating that somehow you're getting your food or whatever from that. You're just chanting Hare Krishna, hearing the scriptures, associating with devotees, worshiping the Lord with no material desires. So this is what we call bhakti. So it's a little bit different from this system where the concern is to support your material body, etc. So therefore, this direct system of simply worshiping the Lord to attain higher levels of bhakti, that is what we call bhakti, bhakti yoga, the proper bhakti yoga, or bhakti yoga in capital letters. So technically we call this sarup siddha bhakti, which means that those actions in themselves generate more bhakti directly without having to do anything else. So by chanting the holy name, we can realize Krishna. By hearing about Krishna, we can realize Krishna. So that's the very form of the activity is such that it leads to devotional development. Whereas these other activities, like the karma yoga system, yes, they gradually elevate us, but they don't directly give us bhakti. There's some bhakti in there, but it's a secondary thing. And the main goal is artha dharma kama. At the same time, raising you through the gunas. So its sarup is not bhakti. The sarup is support your material body, get some enjoyment, and elevate yourself. But then we want to modify that to make it more spiritual. So then we call that aropsiddha bhakti. We modify that system by introducing a little bit of worship of Krishna or Vishnu in it, or offering the results to Vishnu. Then it becomes a little bhaktiized or spiritualized, and we call it aropsiddha bhakti. So in this way, or we call that the Daiva Varnashram system. So there is a distinction, therefore, between what we call bhakti yoga and karma yoga. Karma yoga is a system where originally the intent is artha dharma kama. And in bhakti, the intent is Krishna prema. Then we get a little bit of a mixture somewhere along the line. Here we get a little more mixture by offering the results to Krishna, karmarpana, etc. And then we get another mixture in bhakti when we have mixed bhakti, where the goal is not only to get Krishna, but also to get our material desires satisfied. So we get a little bit, we say, transition from one to the other, where we get the karma yoga, karmarpana, then we get mixed bhakti, then we get pure bhakti. So the pure bhakti is the method is the form of bhakti by which we get prema. The mixed bhakti, we get more than you get from this Varnashram system. So if we look closely, if you do this Varnashram system and you do Nishkama Karma Yoga, etc., What is the result? Elevation up into Brahmaloka. That's what you get from that system. If we do mixed bhakti, what do we get? If we do pure bhakti, we get prema, beyond the material world. If we do a rope siddha bhakti with varnashram and all that, then we get it to Brahmaloka. If we do mixed bhakti, mostly bhakti, but we got these desires for material things, what happens to us? Do we go to Svargaloka? We go to Brahmaloka? We do something? We go to Vaikuntha? Huh? So we should get better than the people who are just doing karma yoga, and nishkama karma yoga should get better than that, which means you should get liberation at least. But devotees don't really want liberation either. They're not striving for that. Yet, they must get less than prema. Huh? Cannot get prema. That's for pure bhakti. Okay? So therefore, the mixed devotees are said to get up to Vaikuntha, when they get Sarupya and Salokya. Huh? But they don't establish a very firm relationship with the Lord. There's a relationship, but it's rather weak. Huh? And they don't directly serve the Lord. They can meditate on the Lord more than anything else. Huh? So that's their position. Whereas one who does pure bhakti, then he may become servant of the Lord and serve him directly. That's dasya or sakya or vatsalya madhurya, like that. So pure bhakti leads to more direct relationship and higher bliss. Mixed bhakti, okay, you get better than karma yoga, jnana yoga, sangha yoga, but you get less than one who practices pure bhakti. So that is why there's an emphasis on pure bhakti rather than mixed bhakti. You can do karma Mr. Bhakti and try to get material results from your bhakti also. Or you can do Gyan Mr. Bhakti and you want to get free from all the material distresses and get liberation as well. So through that Gyan Mr. Bhakti, you can get Shanta Rasa. You're very peaceful in the spiritual world. No more material distress. But the relationship with the Lord is rather weak. Shanta, very peaceful. So, therefore, bhakti also has different forms. We have this Sarup Siddha Bhakti, but then we have the pure form, then we get the mixed form. So, we can also have different types of mixed forms of bhakti. When we mix the desires into it, that is not considered good because we say, Anya abhidashita shunya, you should be free of other desires. So desire for material benefit or liberation should not be mixed in it. So if we mix it, then it's not considered pure. But then we can mix in another way. That is, we can do bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering, etc. And we can take elements of karma yoga or elements of jnana and do that along with the bhakti. So this is quite commonly done. And there's nothing wrong with that. So in the definition of bhakti given by Rupa Goswami, he says, this is jnana karma jnanavritam. This bhakti, uttama bhakti, should not be covered by jnana, karma, etc. It doesn't say you don't, sunya, it's absent, but it doesn't obstruct it. So the obstruction comes when we put the desires in there. We do karma yoga along with bhakti and we have desires for material benefits also. That becomes obstacle. If we do those activities without any material desire, no problem. Then it's allowed. It is not obstructing. So we can do that karma or that jnana along with the bhakti, and it's permitted, and it's still called pure bhakti. So in other words, we mix elements or angas of karma yoga or jnana yoga with the bhakti, and don't have any material desires attached to that, and fine, we can do those. Why would we do those things? Besides bhakti, some people say, well, I'm so overwhelmed by bhakti, I can't do anything else. But some people might find these things favorable. So, in general, we do have to support our material body. You have to eat. People have to have jobs to support their families. So what do? They have to do something other than bhakti. You can't just chant all day long, and you've got to eat and support your family. So therefore, you need an occupation, and then you need rules to follow in that occupation. So as far as your material needs, and family needs, and social needs, then follow the varnashram system. That gives you a set of rules to follow. So no harm in doing that. And still you can be doing pure bhakti, uttama bhakti, because you don't have material desires mixed with your bhakti, that's all. And these are to support your material needs. So So therefore, the Bhaktivedanta Thakur calls this secondary rules of bhakti, gona vidi. The mukhya vidi are the sarupsita bhakti, that is hearing, chanting, remembering. Then we have the other rules to support your body, and your social thing, family, etc. That's varnashramic rules. And that is called gona vidi, or secondary rules, to support. So they're a little bit different, because just simply by bathing or by working according to the rules of varnashram, you don't get bhakti from that. It doesn't increase your bhakti. But it supports your devotional processes of hearing, chanting, remembering. So, therefore, it is recognized or approved that you can follow these rules. The only restriction is that in following all these rules of varnashram system, you should not worship devatas with the idea that they give independent results. So, or anything that's contradictory to bhakti principles, we don't incorporate that. We exclude those things from our activities in the varnashram system. And then we can do those activities. The other reason people may follow is to set an example for others, to follow that system of karma. As we see with people like Prithu, the Manus, they're not really, because he's an avatar of the Supreme Lord, so he's not really obligated to follow Dharma at all. He's doing this as a duty, setting an example as a king and following the rules himself. So this is setting an example for other people. So you may have no need to do it, and one is completely satisfied with bhakti, but to set an example for people, then he may follow the rules. So, therefore, though we do bhakti, and that's the process, we do not necessarily reject everything else. We could follow those rules. Similarly with jnana, certain aspects we can follow, certain aspects are not favorable. One aspect of jnana which is not favorable is studying shastras to get impersonal Brahman realization, so that we have to reject. But then they have other things that may be a little bit favorable, like certain austerities, separating oneself from materialistic people, living in a solitary place at some time. Not always favorable, sometimes favorable. Or vairagya, or what is somewhat favorable in the beginning. So in this way, the angas in themselves may be favorable, and therefore we can do them. But if they become too prominent, again, and we get attached to them, then it may be a problem. So therefore it can be done, but they should not obstruct the principles of pure bhakti. So in this way, one balances out. So in this system here, Prithu Maharaj is the king, and he is instituting Dharma, following Dharma, and he's also a great devotee of the Lord because he's a Shaktivash avatar. So he also gives an example of bhakti, and he instructs his citizens to worship the Supreme Lord and understand the position of the Lord, that he is supreme. And that is mentioned here, that the Lord is Hare, which means most attractive. He attracts everyone. He has most attractive qualities. Therefore, why not worship the most attractive person? He is Guru. He's full of all wonderful knowledge. So therefore, why not worship him? Because he has all knowledge and we have very little knowledge. And he is the controller of all of the devatas. Whatever you want from devatas in terms of material necessities is ultimately under the control of Krishna. So he can supply all your material needs. So we have to recognize the position of that Supreme Lord, even in the Varnashram system. So Prithu is instructing the people to do this, that you follow your duties and whatever. That's good, because that's the will of the Lord, that we support ourselves with some restrictions. At the same time, recognize the Supreme Lord there. So when that recognition becomes more prominent and we do activities of worshiping the Lord directly, then we call that bhakti yoga. And then the other things are there, but they become very secondary. And when this element is prominent, following the rules and regulations of your occupation, etc., and there's a little bit of worship of the Lord, then we call that karma yoga. So there's a gradual transition between the two as well. in any case, the Manu, or the king, a descendant of Manu, he is instituting both systems, Bhakti Yoga and Dharma. The nature of Bhakti is that it is independent of other systems. It does not depend upon anything else. And therefore, even if you don't do Varnashram or Jnana Yoga or Astanga Yoga, you can do Bhakti Yoga. It stands on its own. And it gives results. Karma Yoga is not independent. You have to worship the Lord in that system. Otherwise, you don't get your results. You cannot get Svargaloka even. Huh? So it depends on some worship of the Supreme Lord, or Bhakti. Huh? Bhakti does not depend on anything else. So whether you do or not do, you could get prema. Chant the holy name, you get prema. And you don't have to follow all the rules and the system of Varna and Ashrama. Just chant the holy name, you can get prema. So it's independent. So it's in a much higher position. So therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, give up all activities and just surrender unto me. Give up all dharmas and surrender unto me. Why would he say that when here Prithu is saying the opposite? Follow your dharma and do bhakti, whatever like that. So give everything up, just do bhakti. Huh? So one reason is to emphasize the fact that bhakti is independent and it doesn't depend on anything else. So if you have to do something, do the bhakti. And if you can do other things, fine. But if you can't, then just do the bhakti at least, and you're successful. The other reason, possibly, is that Krishna understands in Kali Yuga, it's difficult to do much of anything. So at least do the bhakti, even if you can't do anything else. And of course, in Kali Yuga, the whole system of dharma is destroyed anyway. So it's very difficult to follow that system. And of course, there is no descendant of Manu. He's disappeared. So there's no king to institute that system also. So in the Bhagavatam, it describes that the descendant of Manu is invisible at the moment. He's got a name, but he's hiding up in the Himalayas someplace. And he won't manifest himself till the next Satya Yuga. So we get the whole rest of Kali Yuga there. There's no king, there's no descendant of Manu to institute that Varnashram system. So whatever we do to do Dharma is kind of a struggle. We can do a little bit here, a little bit there, but it's always a struggle because the king is not there. So therefore, that system itself is a little bit difficult to follow. But what is the blessing in Kali Yuga? At least bhakti is there, and it can stand independently anyway. And in bhakti itself, we have Yuga Dharma, Nam Sankirtan. So that's the big blessing in Kali Yuga. Everything else is faulty, but chanting the name of Krishna is there. So that's the big benefit. It stands alone, it's independent, doesn't need anything else, and you can get the highest goal. So therefore, Krishna says, give up all dharmas and just surrender unto me. Just do bhakti. And Lord Chaitanya says, just chant the holy name. So therefore, in spite of all the difficulties in Kali Yuga, we got a wonderful process by which we can get the highest result, even if there is no proper social system and Varnashram intact. Okay, any question? Yeah. Yeah. And this is always a big topic because what did Prabhupada mean by Varnashram? What sense? Yeah? And for some people, if we look carefully at Varnashram system and then we start looking at all the rules and regulations, we don't want to follow that. You get all these duties, nitya kriyas you have to follow and stuff, but we're not really interested in all those things, your daily activities of a brahmana or whatever like that, and doing shraddha rites and all these things. That's an essential part of the whole system, But then we say, well, we don't want to do that. So what actually we want to do? So do we want to do the Varna rules and restrict people to a certain thing? All you people got to be Sudras, and that's it. You can be Vaishyas, you can be the Kshatriyas, and we'll be the Brahmanas, like that. That's not going to work too well either, I think. People are a little more independent-minded now to force them into a certain occupation even. So certain things are a little bit vague. What actually do you mean by Varnashram system? In one place, as Prabhupada says, I think in the Bhagavatam, he said, well, okay, real Varnashrams chanting Hare Krishna. But then in other places, well, all people cannot take to, chanting Hare Krishna, so let them follow Varnashram. But then that's even harder for many people. How are they going to follow 4 regulated principles? That's harder than chanting Hare Krishna, isn't it? For most people in this world, at least. So, what is that Varnashram? We have to establish what does that mean actually. My guess is that it means take some elements of that system in which are more favorable for devotion and try to incorporate those things at least for supporting people's body and their social needs or whatever. To some extent we can, come up with some guidelines for that at least in terms of raising family, marriage, social interaction, respect for elders and whatever, things like that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
But when we become Bhaktivedanta,
Yeah, yeah.
we embrace pretty much a Brahminical culture.
I try to enforce the 4 regular principles on everybody, and yeah, 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 yeah.
And then realize that, and
Yeah.
so is it possible to change your svabhava?
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, theoretically, yes, because Bhagavatam says, and this is what we actually do when you take Diksha. When you get that Diksha, then you get a Brahman thread and a Gayatri mantra. And so that's based on the Bhagavatam statement that even the dog eater, if he once chants the holy name purely, then he surpasses the Brahmana, and he's qualified to do a yajna that a Brahman does. So what happened to his svabhava? He was, by karma, he was in the lowest thing, not even in the Varnashram system. He was lower than a Sudra. But then he chants the holy name, and suddenly he's better than the Brahmana. He surpassed the gunas,
So then when he stops chanting,
Huh?
because we see the devotees become very elevated, but then they stop.
Okay, then they're back to, then they revert back to their gunas, original gunas.
So one has to keep that bhakti.
Yeah, steady. Yeah. So that's why Bhaktivedanta says, okay, you chant the holy name once purely, but then, okay, let's make it steady. So therefore he says, when you get your Diksha, we'll do it. Not just anyone chants Hare Krishna and then, okay, you're better than a Brahmana. So he put it after the Diksha, which means that he's looking at the person and gradually, becomes steady and he's practicing bhakti nicely. And then when he's real steady, then, okay, give him Diksha and then give him the Brahma Gayatri mantra, then he's better. Even then, of course, we see that many people still, they got their tamagun manifesting and rajagun manifesting, so there's not that they actually got it, but that's at least what you say theoretical. Or we can say not theoretical, but to our eyes, externally, that's what's happening. Internally, we don't know. Because in the case of Ajamil, all of his karmas were gone when he named his son Narayana. But externally, he looked like the same old sinful person. And he was doing sinful activities. But actually, all of his karmas were finished. But nobody knew about it. Even he didn't know about it. So sometimes internally what is happening is a little bit different from what we see externally.
And that's why bhakti is so important, because even if there's a regression, no one's embraced bhakti,
Yeah.
it might become weak or
Yeah.
distracted, but you get material benefits from bhakti.
True. Yeah.
You get, money,
Yeah.
you get fame,
Mm-mm.
certain things, so
Yeah.
one might get distracted.
Yeah.
And for that.
Yeah.
But as soon as he takes up bhakti again, then he's
Yeah.
elevated
Yeah.
up to that.
And if one doesn't commit offense, then no matter what happens, that bhakti continues life after life. Whatever you've achieved, that pushes you into the future and influences you towards bhakti in the future also.
So the svabhava can be changed
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
constant
Yeah.
application of bhakti.
Yeah. But it can also be changed by karma yoga, but it's a very gradual process. You act as a Sudra for many lifetimes. You gradually restrict yourself a little because the rules for Sudras are much less than anyone else. It takes a long time because they're not capable of following too many rules anyway, so they put a little restriction on them. And gradually they go through the gunas and they get to, a mixture of Rajagun and Tamagun, become Vaishyas. So they've changed over many lifetimes. And then they get more restriction on them, and they become Kshatriyas. Then they get more restriction, they become Brahmanas. But it's a long process of changing their svabhava.
Even within ISKCON, Prabhupada wanted to create a unicorn. This one about having one ashram
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Like that needs the king, but it also needs the Brahmanas.
Yeah, the advisors.
Start with the head.
Yeah.
And then by creating a culture of
Yeah.
devotion,
Yeah.
then the goodness will, or even the Buddha sattva will become common.
Yeah.
Over maybe in other generations,
Mm-mm.
gradually. And then you have a community of Brahmins that
Uh-huh.
then influence the rest of society.
Mm-mm.
Isn't that our strategy?
Well, that's one thing. But then, if we're then of course that's for whole society. Then we act as the Brahmins or the spiritual advisors, and influence the administration. That's one way of looking at it, for the whole of society. Then we have what to do about ISKCON itself. Are we going to start doing the same thing? But then there's a problem there because is everybody a Brahmana? Or are we going to put them into different categories? So how do we institute within the institution? How do we do it externally? We've got two different programs, and it's a little bit complicated to figure out the borderlines of those things and how they... Hmm. Yeah.
You have to just look, and we mostly do it. We look at
Mm-hmm.
we do the bhakti and that elevates us, but
Yeah.
at the same time practically.
Yeah.
We look at the person, the qualities.
Yeah.
But there are some devotees that will never be Brahmanas.
Yeah.
It's right?
But externally, at least.
So it's quite a challenge.
Yeah. Well, one devotee remarked this, that actually, is it actually proper that we're trying to enforce everybody up to this level? Because we do that because of social pressure, they do it. But then later on, when you're not looking, they fall back down again. So it's artificial for them because they haven't, that's not their svabhava at this point, and it's more gradual. But somehow we push them into doing this, following regulated principles, getting initiation, and they come up to that, but then may disappear after a while. Like, maybe, I don't know how many disappear in other countries, but in Russia, maybe 80% disappear after a while. 80% or something after 10 years, So there's not a very good record. So well, this is a little bit artificial, we try to do that. So my remark was that actually, Lord Chaitanya didn't do that either. He just encouraged everybody to chant the holy name, wherever you're at, in whatever position, and then you can advance at your own rate. Now, for certain people who are sincere, obviously we can encourage them to come up to higher standards, but it's not necessarily going to be like that for everybody. So therefore, we would have to see the adhikar, or the qualification, different types of people, and preach to them differently. And for some, we'll just chant Hare Krishna, whatever you're doing, just chant Hare Krishna. Do a little worship or whatever. Others, we try to put more rules on them. Others, we put more rules on them, according to their, what we think is they can maintain steadily.
And if they do that, they'll get a higher taste.
Yeah. And those people that are on a lower level and you don't force them to go higher, they'll be very happy to do whatever they're doing at that level, and they'll feel a little, not repressed and not, uncomfortable or whatever. And they'll gradually progress, but it's, a slower process for them.
The other day was upset because he'd written all of the Vedas and Narayana was encouraging him just to glorify Krishna.
Yeah.
And he's saying, they'll fall down, people will fall down.
Yeah, you follow a gradual system of elevation.
He says, that's okay, let them keep hearing the Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
And of course, chant Hare Krishna, whatever.
Yeah.
Then gradually they'll be elevated
Yeah.
without having to follow all the rules and regulations of this and that.
Yeah. So the normal system, the Varnashram, is elevate through the gunas by following your Varna rules from Sudra upwards, And that's how you elevate, and you worship different devatas along the road, and also the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavatam versions, everybody worship Krishna and elevate that way. Yeah.
We also get material benefits as well.
Yes, definitely.
And so we can encourage people to worship Krishna and you'll be successful.
Oh yeah. On a lower level, yes. That's why we have the 4 types of devotees, and Krishna says, I accept them all. Those who want material things, those who want to get rid of their suffering. And so, yeah, you worship Krishna anyway. Savakarma, whether you have all desires, no desires, or desires for Krishna, you worship Krishna anyway. Obviously, we recognize that pure bhakti is best, but still, for other people, they can't do that.
And also, to try to get rid of material desires for some people,
Yeah.
that's just such a,
Yeah.
it's a struggle with the fight that you don't even want to get into
Yeah.
because where does it end?
Yeah.
So let's just chant Hare Krishna and not think about it.
Yeah. And gradually they get purified. Especially by association. If they have good association, they can become purified. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the lowest, yeah. Mm. Oh, well, I think the highest intelligence there means we follow the scriptural rules rather than, and we don't speculate on what it means. We follow the, what the scripture says rather than concoct our own version like that, in that sense. But that's higher because it's scripture we're following. It's not that you're simply confused about in the material world, you're not thinking. In the lowest mode, in Tamagun, they do think, but they think all wrong. They have thoughts, but they have the wrong conclusion, and they do the wrong thing. Everything is opposite of what it should be. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, because the descendant of Manu is not there, who is an essential factor, the monarch of the king, the bona fide line is missing. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to do anything until the next Satya Yuga, when suddenly he manifests again and he establishes the whole system. So definitely we see, maybe that's an arrangement of the Lord also, that system's not there. And then the positive aspect is that bhakti becomes prominent. There's nothing else to take shelter of. Can't take shelter of the social system established by the king because it's not there. So everyone has to surrender to Krishna and take to bhakti and Harinam. Yeah.
Golden age.
Yeah, within Kali Yuga.
What's that look like?
Well, that's described in the Brahma-Vaivarta Purana. After 5,000 years, and for 10,000 years, there will be more prominence of scriptural, following scriptures, reading scriptures, worshiping of the Lord, etc. So there'll be a rise in, say, devotional activities at that time. Well, more bhakti society.
So bhakti would bring that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Obviously, we had to follow rules and regulations and whatever like that. So more dharmic society, more devotional society.
That notion of the Brahminical culture influencing the leaders.
Yeah.
It's not. We see it even happening today.
Yeah.
We see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We even see that with the Christian, the rise of the Christian church.
Mm.
They influence
The political leaders, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
leaders of society,
Yeah,
the priests.
yeah.
In fact, they became the Kshatriyas too.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, they had their material reasons also, but they had their material reasons. They became Christian because of a certain reason, a material reason, not a spiritual reason.
But it would probably happen even in manifestation of bhakti.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the easiest way, that the devotee influences the leader.
Yeah.
And then the leader affects the society.
That's right. And
Yeah.
we couldn't expect them all to be pure.
No,
Even
no,
with
no.
ISKCON, we
Yeah.
don't see
Yeah.
everybody's a
Yeah.
pure Brahmana and that walks
Yeah, 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 yeah.
pitches off the ground.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You don't see that.
Yeah.
So the practical manifestation of these things might take some time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it may not manifest in the form of Shuddha.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah. But at least the influence is there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And of course there will be Shuddha.
Yeah. Oh, just like we have India, we have Modi, and you know, he recognizes devotees. He's not a devotee, it's not, maybe he's a Shiva Bhakta or whatever, but anyway, still he appreciates the Bhagavad Gita, so that's good.
The Chief Minister of UP
Mm.
is a Brahmachari.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true. Yeah.
I don't know how much of that
Mm.
we'll see it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's because bhakti is such a subliminal.
Yeah. And in America, we have Tulsi Gabbard, a devotee, kind of indirect, not ISKCON, but a devotee at least.
That's what I was thinking. So that way, gradually,
Yeah, influence is there in so many ways.
and even, we kind of think of Rosways and Gopals as hard work.
Yeah.
But the impact that we're having on society
Yeah.
by distributing prashadam,
Yeah.
there's 1,000+ people every day.
Yeah.
getting prashadam. And they
Yeah, that's how you preach to the faithless.
That's right.
You give them prashadam.
We think, oh, just do this to make money, but we do those things.
Yeah.
But actually, we're changing people's consciousness.
Yeah. It's a gradual process, but it works.
Yeah,
It
and
works.
it's
Yeah.
like Prabhupada was talking to his niece, and he asked her, have you been crossways? And she said, everybody in the world has been crossways. Whether they wrote, whether you're students,
Okay. Yeah.
so we've been influencing people.
Yeah. Generations. Yeah.
And even Vijay and Bharanamurti people, Naveen and Vinada,
Mhm.
they always tell me Melbourne is one of the best places in the world to do
Yeah.
distribution.
Oh, because people on a different level.
So, there's sometimes, because, Prabhupada is the example of how you're on the aeroplane. That doesn't look like you're going anywhere.
Yeah.
You look down,
Yeah.
But actually, we try to go at a very rapid speed
Mm-mm.
in terms of our own personal development, because our influence on
Yeah.
society. It's sometimes it's imperceptible
Yeah. Sure.
what's going on.
Mm.
It's actually very rapid.
Yeah. And that's also how we preach to the faithless people. We either give them prasad, or they can hear the holy name, or whatever. We don't have to preach to them. We just expose everybody to the Krishna somehow or other in some means, and that's beneficial for everybody. But it takes time.
Otherwise, we'll get into arguments with you all the time.
Yeah.
Here we see Putu Maharaj leading by example and teaching citizens.
Mm.
So why is the parents not doing it? Is he hiding from that?
Well, I suspect he's trying to make Lord Chaitanya's movement prominent. Everybody has to depend on Lord Chaitanya now.
You can't go against there's the influence of the yogis.
Yeah.
You've got to go along with it.
Time just goes on, and it's got its own arrangement according to the Lord. Okay, Hare Krishna.